Bell, when I was younger, it was commonly known that if you wanted to get ahead, you would have to go to college. It was assumed. And middle class kids, it was like grade 13, 14, 15, 16. Many kids didn't really even make a decision. They were just always going to go to college, and so they applied a few places and went. And that lasted a long time. But recently, maybe since Murray published a book several years ago, seriously questioning whether every kid should go to college, a lot more and more people have questioned whether it makes sense for all kids to go to college. So what do you think?
Well, first of all, I think if you're talking about the kind of people we grew up with, of course, many of us did expect to go to college. But if you're looking at the population as a whole, college going has not been common. In fact, it was much less common in the past than it is now. College enrollment rates have more or less doubled just in the last few decades. The problem is not that people aren't going to college. The problem is that they aren't graduating. The dropout rate from college is over 40%. Now, there are huge variations. At the most selective schools, if you can get into Harvard, you're highly likely to graduate. Almost everyone graduates who gets into Harvard because it's a very selective school and they only take people that they think can do the work. But at the other end of the spectrum, we have a lot of less selective, more open admission schools, and the dropout rates are extraordinarily high, and there's a lot of money wasted on people going to college who aren't going to ever finish.
By the way, I don't want to interrupt, well, I do want to interrupt you. Just to point something out to strengthen your point, I think the best data we have on this is from the panel study of income dynamics. I think you probably know this, but it's worth pointing out. And if you array young kids by the ones that come from the richest fifth of families, the top, roughly over $100,000, and then the next richest and so forth, down to the bottom, families roughly under $20,000, and then do their college enrollment and college graduation, it looks like upside down stair steps. So the richest kids, they're more likely to enroll in college, and then the next richest and so on down. And then, so you get an inverse relationship for enrolling in college. And then graduation, the difference is even greater. So when we get down to the bottom quintile, the bottom fifth by income, their graduation rates are something like 10%. So there's a huge difference. And don't you think that one of the most important consequences of this set of facts is that post-secondary education perpetuates the class differences in our society?
I think that post-secondary education does tend to perpetuate class differences in our society. Now, we've done a lot of things to try to help kids from lower income families go to college and be ready for it and get the financial assistance they need. And I think you and CC Rouse have recently been studying some of the programs that are aimed at helping especially low-income kids be ready for college. Could you say a few words about that?
Yeah, thank you for asking me. This goes all the way back, believe it or not, to the War on Poverty. So the people who organized the War on Poverty under President Johnson recognized that college was a big deal. And if they could get more low-income, especially minority kids, into college and through college, that they would join the middle class, and that was part of the Civil Rights Revolution. So they started programs that were intended to identify kids who might have some talent and to help them during sometimes even as early as the elementary years, but especially junior and senior high. One of the programs was called Upward Bound, and later they added something called Upward Bound Math and Science, which focused just on math and science. So these programs have gone on, and we've added at least 6 or 7 more programs to that on the federal side, and then there are some private programs as well. So what Cece and I did was we looked at the evaluations of these programs. They're not always great evaluations, but there are evaluations of the programs, and they are really unimpressive. I mean, they just don't produce much of an impact. So we're spending about $1 billion federal dollars, plus some programs in the private sector, not even included in the billion here. And they just are not doing the job like so many other social programs that you and I know about and regret very much that they're not more effective. Well, the Obama administration, this fits right exactly into something that they've specialized in, which is, as the president said in his original inaugural address, we are going to stop paying for what doesn't work and we're going to pay more for what does work. Well, here's something that doesn't work very well. They're not horrible, but they don't work very well. We could do a lot better. So Cece and I recommend that they up the competition, much like the Obama administration is doing with Head Start, and people who can submit applications and show that they could do a better job would get the money. So this would bring a market mechanism of competition, which you should love as an economist, to improving these programs to help low-income kids graduate from college. And this would resolve, or at least address, one of the main problems that you're pointing out, which is it's horrible when kids go to college and get big debts and they don't even finish, so they don't get to bigger wages, so they're really stuck. And if we could help them more to qualify for and graduate from college, it would be much better.
Well, I think that's right, and I'm very glad you're focused on those programs. They are, as you suggested, relatively small. We spend about $1 billion a year, as you said, on them. The programs that help people once they're in college, I'm talking about the grant programs and the student loan programs, we spend $100 billion on them, not $1 billion, but $100 billion. And there is no evidence there either that they're working. I've been shocked by this, that we're spending that much money on subsidizing higher education without much evidence that it increases graduation rates. Here are all of these kids who are going to college, and they're likely to be taking out debt, and then so many of them are not finishing that it will be a terrible burden for them going down the road. So I'm concerned about this. Right now, student loans are the biggest item on household balance sheets other than mortgage debt. College student loans are a bigger source of debt for households in the U.S. now than credit card debt or than automobile debt. And if they take on this debt and then they don't even graduate,
right,
they're not going to be able to get a great job, and they're going to be in trouble, and eventually the system may be in trouble. We looked at the way in which what you get from your investment in college pays off over your career because you have higher earnings. And on average, it's a very good investment for most young people to go to college, especially if they can graduate. But the variation is very wide. If you go to a selective school, the return is much higher than if you go to a less selective one. The return is higher from public universities and from private ones, simply because the cost of going to a private university is so high, so you have to make that much more to make that worthwhile. And then major makes a big difference. People who major in engineering and science, they are doing very well. But if you major in education or the arts, not so good. So not everyone is benefiting from college. The average person is, but not everyone.
It's fortunate that we don't have anybody in Washington who misleads anybody else with statistics. But I have heard so many people cite the very number that you cite about the average return to go into college, which is very good. And they make that as an argument that this is why all kids should go to college. But isn't it your point that if you look at the distribution of people who go to college, that the upper part and probably down a little bit further, it is worth it to them. But the ones in the bottom that were not qualified to go and went to lousy colleges and dropped out of colleges, that they're in the average, but you don't see it unless you take the next step and say, oh, but those ones at the bottom, they're really getting a lousy deal.
Well,
is that right?
I think that's exactly right, and you said it very well, and I think it goes back to what you've been talking about and studying, which is if we don't have better preparation at the secondary level, then we're not doing kids a big favor to send them to a non-selective school with a lot of debt, and they then later drop out or major in something that really isn't going to give them the skills they need for today's labor market. They'd be better off going into a vocational program, an apprenticeship, get some technical training for some jobs that are going begging right now because we don't have enough really highly trained people.
Right. But I would point out very quickly, I've last year, just by coincidence, had the good fortune of going to Wisconsin and meeting with a bunch of business leaders and some legislators to talk about the problem of education and employment. And then about a couple months later, went to North Carolina for the same kind of event. And just, I think this was a coincidence, but there were employers there who participated. And in both places, there were employers who said, you know what, if we had more welders, we could increase our bottom line, we'd make more profit, we could hire many, many more people, and we could make more business. One guy even said, with the president of the company, and he said, we are turning away business because we lack welders. My only point is, there are other ways to do well in our economy than get a 4-year college degree. If you could become a welder through an apprenticeship program or some training program specifically designed to produce welders, you could also do pretty well.
We definitely need more welders, and I think that one of the problems in the United States, and we differ here from some of our competitors abroad in Europe, we think that it's a mistake to track people too early into a vocational area. That somehow or other that will limit their opportunities. And of course it could if not handled correctly. But my contacts in Germany, where they have a very good skill training system and apprenticeship system, tell me that it doesn't have to be that way. We could do both. We could provide the skills training and also make sure that everyone has a path to a 4-year liberal arts college if that's what they really want.
Well, Belle, I've enjoyed talking to you about this. You've informed me a great deal about all the problems with college education, and I'm glad we had this chance to talk.
Thank you.